hello, hello. Welcome to another Sunday Afternoons with Reverend Lucretia. I am so glad that you have joined me. And so if you would like to listen to the song before you listen to the talk, the link will be down below. The title for this week's talk is What's Inside You? And the song is Be the Moon by Chris Tomlin. So if I had to sum it up in one word, everybody thinks it's going to be God, and it is God. God is the infinite potential that lives inside us, but it's also potential. We're going to be talking about potential a lot today and about living up to that. So before we go any further, let me go ahead and just read you some of the lyrics from the song Be the Moon by Chris Tomlin. You're the Lord of all creation, God. You made me in your image, and I'm just a reflection of the love that I've been given. Everybody wants to be somebody. I want to be somebody too. If I'm going to be known for something, I want to be known for you. Yeah, there's going to be some cloudy days. Sometimes it's going to cover up the work you're doing in me. But still, with every breath I breathe, I want to be the moon, lighting up the dark at night. I'm nothing without the sun's amazing grace on everything I do. If you're shining on me, I'm shining right back at you. Lord, I want to be the moon for you. Isn't that wonderful? I love that song. I thought it was so incredibly wonderful. It just fit exactly the message that I'm doing today. So we're going to be talking about potential. We're going to be talking about the attributes of God, the I amness. We're going to be talking about how we can live up to our potential, and our potential is not always reaching a concrete goal. It might be something like having wonderful, perfect health. It might be like having increased communication skills with those people that we love. It might be about living in joy more often and about being able to feel gratitude more often. So living up to our higher potential is not always saying that you're going to get a specific job or that there's a purpose of your life that you're going to fulfill. It can be the everyday potential that we want to live up to being our best and highest selves. So I heard this story about the orange, and it kind of horrified me. Probably you have heard it already. Wayne Dyer talks about it all the time. So an orange, no matter how hard you squeeze it, no matter what time of day it is, no matter who you're with, no matter where you are, it's always going to produce only orange juice and nothing else, absolutely nothing else. And this horrified me a little bit because I thought there's some times that the stuff that's coming out of me is not all that great. There's times in my head where I reacted with anger or impatience or frustration. And so that's what prompted me to go ahead and ask, what is really inside me? And so we're going to be talking about that today. And what I finally came to understand the answer is we are manifestations of God's love. That's who we're supposed to be. That is what our full potential is, reaching towards that, to be the full manifestation of God's love. So God lives inside me as infinite potential. I realize I shouldn't beat myself up. Abraham Hicks said all the time that I am like the ebb and flow of the ocean. There are days where I'm going to be top of my game, and there are days where I'm not, and I don't beat myself up when I'm not. So as soon as I recognize that I'm not being my best and highest and most wonderful self, I can just bring myself back. And so I've been studying, there's a mystic that I really, really love named Mooji, and he teaches a lot about meditation, and I first started listening to his YouTubes about meditation, but he talks about what's called mind attacks and mind storms. And he says that's when things come over you and you're just not in alignment with your best self. You're just not who you really want to be. He says sometimes you're unable to sleep, you're unable to concentrate, and you're unable to focus. You're just out of alignment with your best self. But he says you can always bring yourself back, that it's your job. You bring yourself back to God. So you bring yourself back to source, that place of pure joy, peace, and silence. He says silence, joy, and natural peace and love, that's God. And so when you get out of alignment and you're not being your absolute best self, you want to come back into that, and you can just tell yourself to bring yourself back. So Wayne Dyer is the one who came up with the orange story. I've actually heard it before, but it really prompted me to ask some questions this time. So he says, you already have everything you need inside you. And so he's talking about the fact that we are infinite potential, we are God, we are manifestations of God's love. And so having said that, we already have everything that we need inside us. What you have is your uniqueness and your specialness. So he reminds us that we can handle anything. It's just how you approach the circumstances that you're in. So when you come to a place where you're being challenged, you can just come back to a place of joy and peace, come back to that God place in you and be your best self. He says that it's about us taking into account always who we are, and who we are is the love of God. That's who we are. That's what lives inside us. So he was asked, what's the difference between highly evolved people and saints and just regular people? And so he referenced this book that he talks about a lot called I Am That. It is written by Nisargadatta Maharaj. And so when asked, do they have unconditional love in them and we don't? The answer is no. We all have that unconditional love in us. Every single one of us, we all have it. It's just that those people that are really highly evolved and that have managed to become saints, that's all they have in them. They have nothing else inside them. So, someone squeezed you, he said, and you behaved towards you in a way that you don't like, and out of you comes hatred and bitterness and tension and anxiety. He says, just pay attention to that and understand that that's not who you really are, and that you can come back to your real self. And he says, you are God. Jesus said, God is love, and he that dwelleth in love dwelleth in me, and I in him. Pure, unconditional love. Divine love. That's who you are. So he talks about Neville Goddard. I'm going to actually give some quotes from one of Neville's talks later on. And he says that the book, The Power of Awareness, had a really big impact on him. And Neville says in that book, you are the I am that I am. So he says, you are consciousness. You are the creator. This is the mystery, this is the great secret known by the seers and the prophets and the mystics throughout the ages. This is the truth about you that you can only understand in your heart. You cannot understand it intellectually. It's something that you know. Sometimes you know something, and that's just inside you. And so that's what this is. This is about you, the truth about you that never changes. So in the New Testament it says, is it not written in your laws that I have said ye are as gods, all of you? So that's John 10:34. Not the God that is outside us, but the God that is perfect love, the soul that wants to expand and is infinite. So in the I Am discourses, he says, the first expression of every individual everywhere in the universe, either in spoken word or in silent thought or feeling, is I am. So we are recognizing our own conquering divinity. That's what he calls it. So you must stand guard strictly over your words. For every time you say, I am not, I cannot, or I have not, you are, whether knowingly or unknowingly, throttling that great presence within you. He says, every time you say the words, I am weak, I am poor, I am unlucky, I am unhappy, I am sick, I am unable to attract, you are discounting and you are desecrating the Word of God. So, Neville, let's talk a little bit about Neville. Neville Goddard has been around for a long time. His first book was written in 1939. It is called At Your Command, but he also wrote Prayer, The Art of Believing, The Creative Use of Imagination, Awakened Imagination, amongst other books. So he had a huge influence on Wayne Dyer, but he also had a huge influence on Rhonda Byrne, the woman who wrote The Secret. So in his 1972 lecture that is called God and I Are One, he says, when you say I am, that is the God of Scripture. So you remember the whole burning bush thing? So the burning bush, Moses was out walking in the desert and God called out to him and said, Moses, Moses. The first words out of Moses' mouth were, I am here. I am hear. And so God told him that he was supposed to save his people, and he was going to, be this major change influence in the world. And when Moses asked him, who should I say is telling me to do this? Who is giving me the power to do this? God said, I am that I am. So the same God of your fathers, the same God who has always been here, the same God who made all of the promises before, the same God who will always be here, the I am that I am, that's who you say that I am. So in the New Testament, we read in Matthew 16:13, Jesus asked his disciples, who do you say that I am? Simon Peter said, you are the Messiah, Son of the living God. And Jesus responded, you are now Peter. So what happens is when you are able to hear God's voice in your own head, when you know something within your heart and within your consciousness and it is coming from God, you are born again. We talk about being born again. When you are in alignment with that God and you're aware of the living God inside of you, you get a new identity. And so he got a new name. And so that new identity was Peter. So he was able to hear from God who he was. And so then Jesus said to him, blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by the flesh or the blood, but by my Father in heaven. Meaning you were able to hear that voice inside your consciousness, inside your soul. You were to know that. There was no other way you could have known that. So Neville says that I amness, when you are aware of the being in your consciousness, that is your imagination, that I amness is God. So Christ is defined in the New Testament as the power of God and the wisdom of God. So that's what we're looking for to have inside of us that we're aware of. And Neville says, you really are God. You are your own wonderful consciousness, your human imagination. That is the God of Scripture, and there is no other God. So he says your body has infinite power and infinite wisdom, yet that is a form. So that is not the real you. When you come to understand the real you is your consciousness, that infinite potential inside you, that is the real you. So I am the cause of the phenomena of my life, good, bad, or indifferent. So when you understand that your thoughts, your consciousness is creating your reality, that gives you infinite potential because you can always change that. You can always work hard to get closer to the manifestation of God by bringing yourself back to source and getting yourself in alignment with God's voice. So I am the light of the world. Say I am, and you name it. When you say I am, no matter how little you have thought yourself so far, may I tell you, you are the infinite God. In John 14:20, it says, in that day you will know that I am in my Father, and you are in me, and I am in you. So Michael Beckwith, you all know Michael Beckwith, a huge, big influence on New Thought. He talks about the God that lives inside of us all the time. And he says, God, intelligence, love, beauty, and life itself. Each of us are expressions of life, therefore expressions of God. Infinite abundance personified as us, never an absence, always a presence. Infinite life, we are the expressions of that life. So some people believe they are victims, and that's not real. They have a victim consciousness where they said, this person did that to me, or, if my parents hadn't done this, or if I wasn't in this horrible relationship, or if this boss didn't treat me badly, they're always blaming it on somebody outside of them. When you understand that blaming outside of you is not real. The only thing that's real is what's inside of you and your own consciousness. And when you give somebody else the ability to change who you are because of what they're saying, that's not real. So the victim consciousness is not healthy, it's not real, but the good news is that you can change it. You can always change that. So you can say, I'm open to something new. What gift am I to give to the world? What is trying to emerge in my life? What is the universe seeking to express in me? So you hear that still small voice, and Michael Beckwith says that still small voice, when you listen to it more and more and more, becomes the only voice that matters. So instead of the voices of the outside, the people in your life that are telling you things about yourself, or your boss, or your relationship, the people that you are closest to, those voices become less and less and less important to you, and that voice inside of you becomes the most important voice. So he says that becomes the only voice that matters to you. the vision that you have inside of you of your potential, whether it be to have perfect health or to get a certain job or to be able to manifest your talents in ways that you were never able to manifest them before, whatever that is, that vision inside you is there. It just may take a little bit of time to manifest itself in the physical world. So he says, what must I become to manifest the vision that I see? And where must I grow? What habits must I change? So remember, God is in us. It's always about the potential for growth and for higher manifesting. Beautiful expressions of infinite possibility. That's who we are. And then Michael Beckwith always says, talk about life as an adventure. So I am on an adventure. I am an adventure about exploring how I can expand, how I can grow, how I can be my best and most bold and most beautiful self. So think of it as an adventure. So one of the new people that I found that I've been really drawn to, for reasons that you'll see are obvious, wrote this article called Who Am I Really? And his name is Hitendra Wadhwa. He is a professor at Columbia. He's founder of the Institute for Personal Leadership. That has now been changed. It's now called Mentera. It's about inner mastery and outer impact. It's about the intersection between science and spirituality, neuroscience, sociology, medicine, psychotherapy. He's about discovering the authentic core that lives within all of us. So he says it's the intersection between timeless wisdom and cutting-edge research. That's why I love it so much. Timeless wisdom and cutting-edge research. The past incorporated with the future. So he was studying the question, how can I live up to my highest potential? And so he studied science, but he also studied the inner lives of great achievers. So great people who achieved great things, great leaders. He studied them. So there was a study at Harvard of Asian American women, and 50% of the women were asked about their Asian American heritage in a questionnaire before they took this test, and the other 50% were asked about being women before they took this test. And the ones that were asked about being Asian Americans did better. It was a math test. They did better on the math test than the ones that identified themselves as women. And he said that's because of all of the stereotypes that we've become aligned with, that there is a myth that Asian Americans are really, really good at math and that women are not good at math. So he talks about the fact that we become good at math because of who we are and because of our inner spirit, and it has absolutely nothing to do with the ethnic or our age or our background or our culturals. But he says that we get stuck in the stereotypes, and the stereotypes impacted their performance. So there was another time where they broke the people into half, and half of the people did a role play of being a boss, and the other half did a role play of being a secretary. And even though it wasn't real life, the ones that did a role play of being a boss did better on the math test than those that role played as a secretary. I find that absolutely amazing. So he said your identification is imprisoning us due to the stereotypes that are associated with that. So how do you raise yourself to your highest potential with the limited when you're limited by these stereotypes? So he gives us 3 strategies. He says the prison of the stereotype identification can be broken out of by looking at people who are the same, background, ethnic, age that you are, but find somebody who really, really excelled and broke all of the boundaries and did these huge, great achievements, so that you're looking for a new role model. So they moved vastly beyond the stereotypes. Positive role model, even though they were fused with their identity. So Churchill, during the wartime, the British were very depressed and upset and nervous and scared and anxious, and Churchill managed to reframe it all by saying, in adversity, British qualities shine the brightest. So what he did was he totally reframed it. He trained people to amend their identity. So by saying, yes, I am British and we're going through this really, really bad time, but the fact is, Churchill says, the British people shine their brightest when they're in adversity. So he managed to turn that around. So you can do that. That's one way. Or you can break out of the mold of the stereotypes. Identify yourself as being a human being, not just the ethnic group or the age or the culture where you were brought up in, but as being part of the human race. Break out of the mold. So you're not just a woman, you're not just an Asian American, you're part of the human race. Identify self as part of the amazing potentiality that the human race possesses, there's no limiting form of identity that's associated with you. He says also you can do it by looking at the big picture. So look at human beings who have achieved these incredibly wonderful things. Look at Olympic champions, look at people who went to the moon, look at the people, who are really great role models, and say to yourselves, if they can achieve this, I can achieve that. So what you're doing is you're associating yourself with the best of the whole human race and saying, if that's possible, then I can do it. So that's the second choice available. So let's shed all parts of our identity except that we're part of the human race. And then the third part is even bigger than that. So you're not only shedding your ethnic and your age and your geography and your social status, you're not only shedding your humanity, being part of the human race, you're shedding to the big picture where you're part of the cosmos, where you're part of the huge big universe. So Gandhi said, I am part of a whole. As soon as we believe one with the ocean in the shape of God, there is no more rest for us, or indeed do we need rest any longer. We are part of the cosmos. So he's saying when you identify yourself as being part of the cosmos, part of God, then you don't need rest because nothing can stop you. There's no limitations on you whatsoever at all. So Steve Jobs was a Zen Buddhist. And what they found out was that the only book that he had on his iPad, the one book was Autobiography of a Yogi. So he said it's about transcending our yearnings. He said we need to put a dent in the universe by rising up to our full potential. So he said that we need to have an ever-expanding sense of self. I am here today and I can expand into something more tomorrow. So let's talk about how we can transcend ourselves. So you know that I'm going to say meditation, and that's what all of the tests, all of the research show, that meditation is one of the biggest, most successful ways of transcending yourself so that you can be part of the universe. So we've talked about it before, what happens in your brain when you meditate. So there is a decrease in activity in the parietal lobe, and the parietal lobe is the part of your brain that when there's a decrease of activity, there is you don't have the feeling of separation anymore. That feeling of separation goes away. It diminishes the sense of separateness that you feel. So through meditation and mindfulness, with consistent practice, you become aware that you can lose your sense of separateness and you are part of the cosmic intelligence that is available to you. So, in answer to his question, who am I really? There are a couple of things. You can challenge the stereotypes, the ethnicity, the gender, the age, and you can become part of the whole human race, or you can even go beyond that and be part of the cosmos to transcend to a new experience of who you are. So, we know that God lives inside us, and that allows us to have infinite potential, and as we view ourselves in the big picture, we realize our great I amness. So H. Emily Cady, you've heard me talk about her before. So she wrote a book called How I Use Truth. This book came out in 1916, and she says, throughout all of his teaching, Jesus tried to show those who listened to him how he was related to the Father, and to teach them that they were related to the Son, the same Father, in exactly the same way. He tried in different ways to explain to them that God lives within them. So there were in the person of Jesus two regions. There was the fleshly material part that was the Son of Man. Then there was the central living real part that was the Spirit, the Son of God. That was the Anointed One. So each of us has two regions of being. One is the fleshly, mortal part, which is always feeling its weakness and insufficiency in all things, always saying, I can't. But at the very core of our being, there is something that in our highest moments knows itself more than a conqueror over all things. It always says, I can and I will. It is the Christ child, the Son of God, the Anointed One that is inside us. So she says, he is the ever-abiding intelligence that fills and renews our mind. His creatures would not exist for a moment were they to be, or could he ever be separated from them. And what we understand is we can never be separated from God. God is who we are, that infinite potential, that I amness that lives inside of us every single moment of every single day. So we are a temple of the living God, even as God said, I will dwell in them, and I will walk with them, and I will be their God, and they will be my people. That's 2 Corinthians 6:16. So, in conclusion, what lives in us is infinite potential. It never ends, it never dies until we do. It's always growing, it's always stretching, it's always reaching to get closer to being the perfect manifestation of God's loves. The potential is always in us. We can choose to ignore it. So when we have a mind storm and we all of a sudden come out with all these words that really don't represent the best part of us, we can always go back to God and go back to our source and go back to being who we really are. And so when I was in my late 20s, I had a friend who moved away and I was devastated, and I just didn't know how I was going to make it. And he said to me, I'm like the moon. He said, sometimes you can see it, sometimes you can't, sometimes it's a little sliver, sometimes it's a huge, big, bright, shining ball. Whether you can see it or not, the days you can't see it at all, whether you can see it or not, I'm always there. I live inside you now. And so that's how I believe God is. I believe whether you can see it, whether you can feel it, if there are days where we're just having a sliver of it and we're not our best selves, or when there are the days where there's a bright, full, shining moon and we are absolutely our best selves, God lives inside us every single moment of every single day. So back to the orange. God is always inside us, always. We work hard always to live up to our potential. There's still going to be days where we have these mind storms, and we have to consciously bring ourselves back to God. We have to consciously bring ourselves back to source. But I believe that for all of us who are connected to God, God flows through us like the blood in our veins. There is never, ever anything inside us except God. And so it is. Thank you so much. I hope this was helpful for you. If you liked this and you think you would like some more information, please click on the subscribe button or hit the little bell so that you can be notified when I come out with new material. I send you on your way with many blessings. Thank you so much.